I'll go ahead and call to order the May 20, 2013 Planning Zoning Commission meeting. See, we have no public hearings, so we'll move straight to approving the minutes for March 18, 2013. Get a motion there or any changes?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Who seconded?
Mr. George North.
This time, I'll open the floor to anyone wishing to speak on something not on the agenda this evening.
Do we have to have an all-aye?
What?
Do we need to have an all-aye approval for the minutes, or?
Yeah, you had a first and a second, so you didn't need a vote.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, that's okay.
Okay, sorry, Jim. Sorry, Council.
That's okay. Seeing no one come forward for citizen participation, do we have any old business? I think we do. We'll move into the new business. So we have a presentation of Commissioners' reference binders. Garrett, you want to Gail?
You want to? Okay, I'll try to be swift this evening. So on this stormy evening, you guys can get home, and I will have to take the blame. This meeting was called by my request, so I apologize for getting you out on a stormy night. But we have been working diligently over the last few years to try to get reference manuals together for all of our commissions and committees. And so we have put together today a procedures manual that Garrett's just going to touch upon briefly, and in here is probably not a cotton-picking thing that you don't already know, but we felt like we need to formalize a little bit our process, and that's kind of my pet peeve is if we all, and I was going to say blow away in a storm, but that's the wrong term to use tonight. If we're not here tomorrow or whatever, we need to have something in place to where the process is documented, and we have a formal binder that we can present to people, to especially new members that come on, and we presented that to, I think, who was it we gave one of these to already? Brad. And so wanted to share this with the commission this evening as well, so that you have a manual to go by. So Garrett's going to go over just kind of the high points of the document.
So now we have to know what we're doing.
No, you already know what you're doing. This just confirms it. Is all this does.
The first part of the binder is just kind of a general overview document where we've gone in and briefly described some of the basics, the structure of the commission, the composition, some of the rules and procedures, the planning and development department and other departments that contribute to all of the analysis and recommendations that you see come before you from time to time. General descriptions of the various plans that we have, and also there's some description in that document about generally how staff approaches any one of the given issues that might come in, whether it's a subdivision or a rezone or a special use permit. You can read through this document, get a little bit of insight into some of our approaches and mindsets that we put into our analysis. And also there's a little bit in there about the legal framework that you'll hear me say from time to time, that we've run this past our legal counsel and he said this. So you have a little bit of background on where he's coming from on some of these issues if you go through that document. There's also just bring to your attention, there's also a brief discussion about sunshine law. If you ever have any question on that, there's a paragraph in there that was prepared by Ron for you guys to have as a reference. There's also other sunshine law documents that you have access to anytime you want through our office or through the city clerk's office. I think the next document in there is just a list of meeting dates for 2013. As you know, there are statutory requirements for public hearings that they happen so many days in advance of the actual meeting, and that's true for rezones and for special use permits, for variances. And so this will give you some reference for if you know of a particular issue that's going to potentially come before this board, and you're wondering, well, I wonder, if it has to be 15 days before it comes to us, where are we at on the calendar? You can reference these meeting dates, plan ahead, know when things might be coming up. as far as P&Z. There's also City Council and Board of Adjustments. They're all listed on there. There's also contact information for your fellow commissioners in there, names, phone numbers, and I think there may be email addresses in there as well, at least for some. The next document, I believe, it should go right into the city code excerpts. What we've done is provided you all with, I'm sorry, no, this is the rules and procedures for the commission.
Robert's rules are.
Right. These are the rules of order of our meetings, how many people have to be there for a quorum, election of officers. Any questions you might have about how the actual meetings are run, you can reference that document there, how to make a motion, second it, all those types of things are available there. Under tab number 4, that's what begins the city code. We've provided you with all of Title 4, which is the land use regulations. There you've got zoning regulations, subdivision regulations, sign regulations, there's even regulations in there about how to change the regulations. So anytime I give you an exhibit that provides our analysis on an issue and I'm referencing sections 405, 720, now you'll have the ability to, okay, here's 405, 720, you can read it in its entirety rather than just having, sometimes I'll provide an excerpt, but a lot of times if you just get that little blip, you lose a little bit of context. So this will give you context to go with the excerpts that we provide in the analysis. It also gives you the ability to cross-reference. If there's a subdivision question and you're wondering how the height and area requirements from the zoning regulations might impact that, you've got both of the regulations here in this binder at your disposal. Of course, you can always feel free to call our office if you've got specific questions or you want us to do a word search or anything like that. These are, of course, also available on the city website. And you can do word searches and things like that on there if you desire to. The next document in here is a zoning map. It contains current zoning, and we'll provide you updated versions of this as rezones occur, maybe on a quarterly basis or so. And it also has a legend to indicate the classification of all the major thoroughfares in the street, whether that's interstate, freeway, expressway, primary, arterial. You'll hear me call out those classifications frequently in our analysis. And those are all designed to indicate what volume of traffic is appropriate on that thoroughfare, how wide that thoroughfare should be, how wide the right-of-way should be. And you'll find recommendations for right-of-way widths pertaining to each individual class of thoroughfare throughout the code document that you had just before this. So there's a good reference. If you want to know surrounding zoning, other similar areas of the city that you think may be similar to the rezone that's coming before you, you'll have this map. You can look very quickly. Again, this is also available online for access that way. The next map in here will probably, at least in my mind, perhaps become the most useful. It's an urban services map of the city. This information is not so readily available online. It is, but it's kind of hard to discern what's going on. This shows you all of our current sewer and water infrastructure in relation to the city limits. It also shows you our urban service and urban reserve areas. And what that tells you is, say we've got a rezone or a PDD that comes in and you're wondering how that's going to impact our public services, you'll have this map as a reference to say, okay, sewer is so far away, water is so far away, and you'll also be able to see easily whether it is inside or outside of our urban service boundary. And what that will tell you is, if it's inside our urban service boundary, what that means is it can be served quickly, without much expense on either the developer or the city's part. It's readily available for water and sanitary sewer services. If it's outside of that urban service area, that means there's going to be several hoops and several hurdles to jump through and over in order to connect to our city services. That's what you'll find. The urban service area, everything's readily available. In the urban reserve area, we're talking 5, 10, 15 to 20 years before we potentially get out there for development. Now, of course, you know, you get project-specific types of things, big opportunities for the city that maybe it's outside in the urban reserve area, but it's worth, you know, public investment. Those types of things will come up, but this will provide a good general guideline for where our services are now in relation to the issues that come before this body. The last
If I
map,
interject,
yeah.
real quick, Garrett, your comment on these are guidelines, these aren't set in stone, but these are guidelines. If we took some of these guidelines and future land use plans and applied them specifically and concretely to everything that we brought in here, then your McLean would not be there, McLean Grocery Distribution Center, your Equestrian Eclipse Center would not be a consideration. So again, these are guidelines. Thank you.
The last map is our future land use map. It also has our major thoroughfare plan for future roadways laid over it. This will be referenced for nearly every rezone that comes before you. It shows what the city has adopted as far as recommendations for future land uses in the city, as well as the locations of future thoroughfares that we believe need to be constructed as the city develops. These are generally intended to look 5, 6, 7 years into the future. This was adopted in 2005, so we're due for a new round of looking at this thing. And you'll notice there's a lot of low-density residential. Once you get away from some of these principal primary arterial thoroughfares, you see areas of the city that you may think, well, that should be appropriate for commercial. Someday that's going to be a highly traveled thoroughfare. Why is it all residential, just all over the place? And that's because, like I said, this is looking 5, 6, 7 years in the future. None of these outlying roads, although we can see obvious potential maybe for commercial or high-density developments on those roads, they're not ready yet. And so that's why you see so much low-density single-family residential, is because for us to go in and say, well, let's go ahead and put some commercial out here in these outlying areas, then it's not ready for commercial because the services aren't there. But then if somebody comes before this group here and says, I want to rezone that property to commercial, we're putting the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council in a tough position to say no because our plan says it should be, when really our services aren't available. So that's just kind of, I get that question a lot, why is there so much beige color everywhere instead of more of a mix? And that's the reason, that those areas just aren't ready quite yet. Now when we take another look at this, I think you'll probably see more color in some of these parts as we've expanded our services over the years. But then what grows from the fringe from there will probably be designated for low-density single-family residential. But these will hopefully be useful to all of you in case you're at home looking at your packet. If you've got questions, you have some reference material here to go to. And like I said, this isn't meant to replace any one of us here on staff. Being the person, call us if you have any specific questions. The last document in there is the sample finding of facts form that you guys have all seen before. That's more in there for new members to familiarize themselves with that process.
Looks like we're going to get an update to the Unified Development Code progress.
Yeah, we have been working, as you all probably know, for, going on about 3 or 4 years now on the Unified Development Code, which will hopefully, it's not going to solve all of our issues, but it will hopefully streamline the processes that we've got and also address some of the codes that we have found to be some of the items in the code that are cumbersome or outdated or just quite frankly don't make sense. So right now we are